found during the cruise that there is a lot of microsleep. So what I call a microsleep means that people are sleeping for a few seconds during the cruise. So during the cruise, the exposure to the risk is quite low, of course. And in this case, pilots are quite aware that they are really, drowsy, as you are when you are driving a car. But we found that there is also a lot of microsleep when they are starting the descent phase and when they are preparing the landing, and we still see a lot of microsleep. But in this case, they are not aware, because they are so busy. They are, talking with the air traffic controllers. They have to check a lot of things. So they have microsleep. They are tired. They have actual fatigue, but they are not, perceiving their own fatigue. And this is where, it starts again to be a risk.
Hi everyone, I'm Annalisa from C.A.C. Global Solutions. I'm here with Brett for another episode of our podcast, Aviation Perspectives with C.A.C. And today we are going to talk about fatigue risk management systems. And the guests are Philippe Cabon from Welbees and Pauline Vrancken, Psychologist and Consultant at Welbees. Guys, thank you very much for your time and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot.
Perfect. So we have a very dense episode here. So let's start with you, Philippe. Can you tell us how did you get into fatigue management, human factor, and how Welbees came to be?
Yeah, sure. So my background initially was in psychology. So I studied psychology, and then I did a PhD in neuroscience. And so I was lucky to have the opportunity to work with the Civil Aviation Authority of France and Airbus. So I had a contract with them regarding some studies on fatigue in long-haul flights. So the idea was to get some scientific data on how the pilots and the cabin crew will cope with a long-haul flight, and especially also very long-haul flights in terms of fatigue, alertness, and sleep management during the layover. So I did my PhD on this topic. So it was like 30 years ago now. And so this is how I started, my research both in fatigue management and in aviation. And so from, starting from this PhD, I developed my expertise with some, I've been working with several airlines doing additional research. And also I've been expert for ICAO, for when they have started to think about fatigue risk management systems, so to have the first guidance and standard and recommended practice on fatigue risk management system. And I've been also an expert for the EASA on flight and duty time limitations when they have introduced new regulation on fatigue management. So this is, more or less how everything I've started. So my background is more, an academic background. And so I've been a professor in human factors at the university in Paris. And then 10 years ago, we are going to celebrate our 10th birthday in a few months. We have decided to start up Welbees. With one of my colleagues who is engineers in aviation, aeronautical engineer actually, and she did also some human factors study in Cranfield. So we found that it was a good combination of skills, and expertise, and so this is why we have started Welbees and working in the area of fatigue management. And just to finish, it was really also the year it was in 2016. It was exactly the year in Europe where they have introduced, some regulation on fatigue management. So we have really, there was a kind of coincidence between when we are starting Welbees and the new regulation on fatigue management.
Wow, very interesting. Great. What about you, Pauline? How did you start with the fatigue management in aviation?
So my experience is much more limited than and much less impressive also. I studied psychology. I did a bachelor's in clinical psychology and then a master's in biological psychology, which allowed me to kind of understand the psychology of the nervous system, central nervous system. And for my master's, I had to have a 1-year internship, which I did at the sleep lab back in Brussels, which is where I'm from. And that's kind of how I got into fatigue management and understanding sleep patterns and all of that. And in parallel to that, I was also a cabin crew as a student job. So I decided after my studies to kind of combine both of those very big interests of mine and go into fatigue risk management in aviation. And that's also how I got in touch with Philippe.
Oh, nice. So do you guys work only in aviation in terms of fatigue management, or do you deal also with other industries?
Yeah, good question. No, maybe 90% of our work is in the aviation industry, but we have started, to work in other industry. In fact, any industry where you have, irregular hours of work, where fatigue might be a critical issue. So we have started to work with railways. So we are currently working with a big railways company. We are also starting a project on the maritime industry, where they have a lot of, issue on the schedules, workload, stress. And also we have been working in the past with truck drivers, because they are also very much exposed, to fatigue, sleep deprivation. So yeah, I would say that 90% of our work is in the aviation industry, and 10% we are starting to diversify our work. Yeah, in other industries.
All right, very interesting.
Interesting. So Philippe, how would you define fatigue, and how does it differ from just being tired? And when did people start paying attention to it in aviation?
Yeah, good point. So yeah, fatigue is quite a complex, things to to define, because there is a lot of ways to define fatigue. The way we tend to define fatigue as a general concept is the fact that it's a drive through a recuperative rest. When you are tired, the first thing you are thinking is, oh, I would like to take a break. I would like to have a sleep. So this is the kind of warning signal in your brain that tell you, okay, this is the time to stop. And so it covers, in fact, various aspects from, of course, some sleep-related aspect. If you have been sleep deprived, if the sleep quality was not good, you will see some sign of fatigue that we call drowsiness, sleepiness, the sleep pressure. So this is one part of fatigue. And there is other part of fatigue which is more related to the type of task you are doing. If you have a lot of mental activity or physical activity, then you will show some sign of physical or mental fatigue. So it's quite a wide concept that show that people need at some point to recover, and this is related both to the time on task, when you are doing the task. So there is some circadian factors. If you are working in the middle of the night, it will not be the same as if you are working in the middle of the day. And there is also some task-related factors. So this is how we are defining fatigue. And just to go on the next part of your questions, I would say that maybe the aviation industry has started to really work on fatigue like it was like 30 years ago. Then when there was the first accident where fatigue was really found to be a contributing factors. And so I guess the initial investigation was done by some sleep expert in NASA in the US, and they did the first investigation on some accident where it was very clear, that the duty time was too long, the flight time was too long, that the crew did not get enough recovery time. And so they have started to push the aviation industry to go to first to improve the duty time limitation, the flight and duty time limitation, and then in the next step to implement some fatigue risk management system that probably we'll be discussing later. So yeah, I would say around 30 years ago, where you have the first work or investigation and the first, regulation that really have started on fatigue management.
So I'm curious with fatigue. I mean, fatigue sets in, and it's not something that typically you're consciously aware of, right? I mean, it can be induced by a number of factors, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, you mentioned circadian rhythms. I'm thinking stress, potential exterior influences, alcohol, drugs, and I'm talking simple things like Tylenol or anything like that. I expect, or a lack of sleep, as you pointed out. So I'm guessing that it's all of these factors together that just kind of fall on you, and you're unaware of it in many instances, right?
Okay, yeah, that's also a very good point. We tend to say that in fact fatigue, I mean, for safety, this is not safety by itself. This is how much you are aware of or unaware of your fatigue. And so in a lot of research study, we found that there is quite a higher underestimation of fatigue. So that means that when we are recording like brain waves, physiological indicators, we found a certain level of fatigue, and then when you're asking the subjects to evaluate their own fatigue using some scale, some questionnaire, you can see that very often they tend to underestimate. And so this is due to different factors. So, and this is really one of the issue in, of course, for safety, because if someone is really tired, but is really aware of that he is or she is very tired, he or she will take some mitigation strategy, will take some breaks, some caffeine, so they will try to mitigate the risk of fatigue. But if someone is not aware of their fatigue, this is where the risk is really starting. And so this is why in FRMS you have a lot of things about making people aware of fatigue. Trying them to help them to also to anticipate, before starting their duty, the fact that at some point they will be tired. So exactly, it's like a warning system again. It's a warning system, and the fact that sometimes you are just denying or not really hearing the sign of fatigue. Just to give you an instance, an example, we did some brain recordings of pilots during longer flights. And we found during the cruise that there is a lot of microsleep. So what I call a microsleep means that people are sleeping for a few seconds during the cruise. So during the cruise, the exposure to the risk is quite low, of course. But in this case, pilots are quite aware that they are really, drowsy, as you are when you are driving a car. But we found that there is also a lot of microsleep when they are starting the descent phase and when they are preparing the landing. And we still see a lot of microsleep, but in this case, they are not aware, because they are so busy. They are, talking with the air traffic controllers. They have to check a lot of things. So they have microsleep, they are tired, they have actual fatigue, but they are not, perceiving their own fatigue. And this is where, it starts again to be a risk.
In similar studies, they showed also that fatigue is much more easy to spot in other people than in yourself.
Yeah.
Which also underlines the importance of having, a crew and crew resource management to be able to all, make this an issue.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I've worked night shifts before with maintenance crew, and I've seen some people that they're totally oblivious to what they're doing, but you could see that they clearly weren't present in what they were doing. So I'm guessing that's kind of an example of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when you talk about micro sleeps, what does it mean? It means that physically they go or they just like the brain goes standby?
Yeah, it means that, if you look at the brain wave, so we put some electrode on the head, we put some electrodes around the eyes, and so we were able to detect stage 1 of sleep. There is different stages in sleep, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And what we have is like, the pilots, they have still the eyes open, but they show some sleep stage, episodes, which last for like 4 to 10 seconds. It may depend, but still having the eyes open. Okay, so this is how we define a microsleep. And so from laboratory study, we found that during this microsleep, you are the risk of doing errors, having a very high reaction time, is very high. Okay, so your brain, yes, is just stop working for a while, and so this is where the risk, of course, is very high. Yeah,
I know a lot of people in that state constantly.
yeah.
Anyhow.
Of course, yeah, it may happen, in meetings. It may happen while you are driving your car.
I bet.
But yeah, it's less known that it may happen also to pilots, while they are flying an aircraft.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Please. I suspect that it's not that they're doing a task that is rather simple, because they are starting to be engaged, right? But I'm guessing if something goes drastically wrong, they wake up out of that state right away. But I suspect there's a lag in between them waking up and knowing what the appropriate reaction should be.
Yeah, that's a good point, because the problem is that when you are sleeping, and if something is waking you up, because I don't know, you have a warning, a situation that you have to solve. The issue is that you cannot go from a sleep state to a very awake state. So there is some kind of inertia. We call it sleep inertia. So especially when pilots, as you know, they are allowed to have some napping during the flight. And if they are if they have been awake because of something happening in the flight deck, we know that their performance will be very low, even if if they have been alerted by the by the noise, by something, by someone, but their cognitive performance will be low. And this is due to the fact that when you are sleeping, the higher part of your brain is still sleeping. And so you are just using the lower part of your brain. That means that you are able to handle some very automatic things, tasks, but not really making complex decisions. And so there is a few examples of incident or even accidents where the pilot were in this state of sleep inertia. So that's one of the issue in fatigue management that we have to manage.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So, Pauline, I would like to ask you this question. What are the contributors to fatigue? We are talking about lack of sleep, but also I suspect stress, because I guess if you're stressed, you're not going to be able to sleep well. And what are the effects on judgment and on performance?
That's a very good question. I could talk about this for 2 seconds or 2 hours. So when we talk about contributing factors to fatigue, you have the whole biological part of it, which is pretty consistent throughout all humans. Obviously, we have the circadian aspects, as we said right before, the sleep pressure also that can contribute to fatigue. But then we have also the factors that are more specific to your task or to your job. When we talk about the aviation industry, we have pilots, but we have a lot of different jobs also within that industry, which makes it very nice. And that also can play a role. So you have all those different aspects of fatigue, whether they be psychological, mental, they can also be muscular, for example. So all of those, it's a very intricate system when we talk about contributing factors to fatigue.
Yeah. Sometimes we may even talk about, a kind of I would say, a psychological fatigue, when you are exposed to a lot of conflict in the team, when you have a lot of pressure, a stress, like you said, a burnout, is a chronic fatigue, an extreme level of fatigue. So it's like a continuum that goes from a normal fatigue that we are all experiencing every day to extreme fatigue when you are in a very bad psychosocial environment. So there is a lot of link, also, as you said, between stress, fatigue, and as you know, in the aviation industry, we are taking mental health very seriously now, and so we try also to integrate, both aspects, because as you said, stress may impact fatigue or sleep, but also the other way around is true. So we need to consider, all of these factors in a wider fatigue management.
If you'd like to continue the conversation, the full extended interview is available free on our website. We've made the complete session downloadable as well, so you can listen at your convenience. You'll find the link in the description. Visit cacglobalsolutions.com/fatigue management.